addicted to drugs. I was smoking weed, which I would steal from family members, smoking cigarettes, anything to stuff inside what happened.
We're going to welcome our special guest, Pastor Bryon. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your testimony with us. You guys, you are in for a complete treat. So sit back and enjoy this episode. So, Pastor Bryon, how are you doing?
Good. I'm great.
Thank you so much for coming on. I just want us to just dive right into it. So let's start with your childhood. What was that like for you?
It was rough, and not in the sense of I grew up in a bad home or anything like that, but my influence around me was negative and positive at the same time. So it was almost like a pool in both directions. I was not raised a Christian. I was not raised in a household of faith. As a matter of fact, when I was born, my grandfather. So my grandfather was the man who would depict the Bible in every way. So if you try to tell him Jesus was real, he would show you why he was not. So he literally would try to debunk every word in Scripture. So he was just blasphemy, end over end, when it came to that. And he actually told my mom when I was born that he seen the devil dancing in my eyes. But as I grew up, it was... I was introduced to the drug world very, very early. And a part of my testimony is trauma. When I was 5 years old, I was molested. I was molested by my cousin, who was a male. So automatically my identity was twisted. And not to the fact where, I thought I was homosexual or anything like that, but I hid who I was and I hid what happened for so long that I didn't know who I really was. So by the time I was 6 years old, I was already addicted to drugs. I was smoking weed, which I would steal from family members, smoking cigarettes, anything to stuff inside what happened, and growing up, it was just, I was rebellious. I was so rebellious, I hated rules, I hated laws, I hated anything that if you said I couldn't do it, I was going to do it just to spite you. I was going to do it just because. But my childhood, my parents really, really tried. They tried to steer me in the right direction. Even the neighborhood we lived in was not good. So they would ship me, use somebody else's address, bring me to another school. They tried. I'd get kicked out of that school, kicked out of this school, for selling drugs in school, for pulling knives on people in school. I was very wild. I was very rebellious. I had just a spirit of bitterness, resentment. Childhood was hard, and I made it that way on myself looking back now, but what happened was I put myself around, I put myself in the street, I put myself in the street, and I got the results of what street life is, so by the time I was 11, I was already fully blown addicted to drugs, addicted to cocaine. And I didn't know I was addicted until I got locked up for the first time at 11. And when I was locked up, I started going through withdrawals from pills and certain things like that. And they sentenced me to my first program, which was, a 6-month program, typical for a juvenile. But that first time I was in that juvenile program was the first time the Lord spoke to me. It's the first time the Lord spoke to me in a dream. You know, that I was actually, they had like a meditation class going on, and me being rebellious, I brought my pillow, I brought my blanket out to this little area. They were doing a meditation, and I was like, you guys can meditate, I'm taking a nap. You know, being rebellious. And I remember I tucked myself in under one of the sofas, and they put on the music for the meditation, and I went to sleep. But when I went to sleep, the Lord gave me a dream, and this was the first interaction that I had with God. And he gave me a dream where I was looking at myself climbing up this mountain, and I was so high on this mountain. Oh, I could feel it. I was so high on this mountain that the clouds were underneath me. And I'm watching myself climb, and I lose my footing. And as I'm falling, two angels come and pick me up, and they put me right back up on this mountain. And they're like, don't worry about anything, Bryon. It's all going to be okay. And then instantly I was up, and I knew in my spirit something was different about that dream. You know, because every kid dreams. We all dream. But that was the Lord speaking to me, showing me something. I didn't know it at the time until years later. It all made sense. But again, I left that program, and I continued to live a life of crime. By the time I was 18, I think I had already done close to 2.5 to 3 years in juvenile programs and juvenile prison and different places. So I spent a lot of my childhood in jail or in a program or something in that manner, some type of incarceration, you know. And that just continued on. It continued on. It continued on. Far into adulthood. I knew no other life. You know, I knew no other life. I thought that selling drugs, the notoriety, the influence that came with selling drugs, the women that came with selling drugs, the cars, all these different aspects that come with that lifestyle, I thought that's what I wanted in life. You know, I had no goals, no ambition. That was it. That was my ambition. And I would always prove to myself that I was no drug dealer. I was a drug user. You know, I was trying to find a solution to what had always happened, what had happened to me as a kid. And I just kept making it worse. You know, what I thought was the solution was actually filling in more of a problem. You know, I found a problem for the solution. You know, it was my childhood was traumatic only because I made it that way. You know. But yeah, childhood was rough, like I said, because of me, because of my rebellion, because of my lack of discipline. I just was, man, it was bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after having this dream, did you, at any point after that, were you starting to feel God, like, kind of pull at your heart a little bit? Was he dropping any, like, nuggets, or was it just like you, like, weren't thinking about any of that at all?
A little bit. Not in the sense of God, but in that program at that time, they would have people come in for like AA meetings. And we would have to do it, but I found out real quick that I was leading these meetings at 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. And other people would notice the leadership skills, the skills that I had to speak in these different things. And I do remember the Lord automatically was starting to pull me away from that lifestyle. There's a radio station around here, actually, the Joy FM, and it was just starting up back then. I'm 37 now. I'll be 38 this month. On Sunday, actually, I'll be 38. And I was 11 then, so it's a long time ago. But they came in, were hearing me speak, and automatically the Lord, they were asking my mom, when he gets out of this program, do you mind if we take him and he works for us and we introduce him to the Lord, you know, and really like bring him up. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm going this way. So yeah, the Lord was dropping things already in my path to bring me to him. But I just wasn't there yet. You know, I wasn't there.
Right.
It wasn't until I was 21 when I actually gave my life over to Christ, so 10 years after that. Yeah. But the drug addiction got way worse. Way worse.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So at what point did it begin to kind of change for you?
So I started noticing I was different from my homeboys, right? I was different. They didn't have the obsession to continue to use, and I wanted to take it to the next level. By the time I was 19 years old, I was so addicted to pain pills that I had a friend introduce me to heroin when I was 19. And not only did he introduce me to heroin, but I was injecting heroin right away. So I was introduced that way. So I was an intravenous user from that point on. And things changed. You know, the drugs became my priority. My family wasn't. My friends weren't. My life wasn't. It came to the point that by the end of it, it took everything away from me. It took my integrity. It took everything. I had no morals. I had nothing. You know. By the end of it all, I was divorced. My wife left me due to drug addiction. It was to the point where my mom, I was living in the woods at 20 years old. I was already homeless, living in the woods. And it got so bad that I would steal everybody's stuff to get high. You know, everything was gone. I had not a dollar in my pocket. I was stealing everybody's stuff, and my parents just got sick of it. And I wasn't even allowed on their property, so I had no money living in the woods. She would make a plate of food and leave it at the mailbox. So I would have to go there, get the food, bring it back, you know, and continue. And just nothing it was never enough. Drugs took my life. Drugs took everything from me. So what happened was the drugs were the solution to the trauma. It was a solution to the problem at the beginning. But through the addiction, through the drug use, the drugs took everything out of me. The drugs became the problem from the solution that I was trying to cover up the problem. The drugs became the problem, and they took over my life. And I tried to get clean so many times. I wanted to get clean, and I couldn't. I just could not get clean. I can promise you there's no drug addict wants to be homeless, have their whole family dislike them, be judged everywhere they go, have to ask for money, you know, live in shelters, to live that lifestyle. No addict wants that, but they don't have a choice. They're in bondage, and it's demonic. It's a demonic influence. It's a demonic bondage that needs to be broke. And then when I was 21, I gave my life to Christ. You know, and I wasn't a believer. I believed in God, but I knew nothing about Jesus. I believed in something that created the universe, that created me, that created everybody. And we used to always say, you know, like, hey, God's with us, you know. And we used to like talk like this, but I was never introduced to him. Mm-hmm. And then one day I had a friend who was getting clean, and he had like 2 years clean, and I'm like, how are you not, you're at least smoking weed or something. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no. I was like, how are you doing it? And he showed me a Bible, and I kind of just rolled my eyes. And I was like, no. I was like, that's not going to work for me. You know, I'm too far gone. God can't do anything. And he told me one thing that stuck with me till this day. He said, if you want what you never had, do what you never done. So that night I went to the chapel in a rehab again. I've been to 16 different rehabs. I've been through rehab 16 times in my life. Institutions were all I knew. So I went to the chapel that night. I remember laying out on the floor and kind of just giving God, like, I just told him, I'm like, hey, I'm giving you a shot. If it don't work, don't expect me to come crawling back, you know. And from that day forward, I've been a believer in Jesus Christ, you know. But I wish I could say that my life just did a 180. I repented and I turned away from all the things that I had done. But it didn't work that way. See, God has a way of putting you in the fire in order to produce the character he needs to allow you to walk in the purpose that he already has on your life. So I had to walk through the fire some more, because he said, Bryon, I'm not going to let you be just where you're at. He said, everything that you're going through is going to be for a purpose. All the fire that you're going through is so that I can transform you into the person I need you to be, to reach the people that I need you to reach. Because I don't know if everybody can look around, not very many pastors are out there reaching out to addicts. They're just not. So, even after that, I can feel the spirit in this room. Even after that, I went back to prison. You know, I went to prison in my life as an adult. I did 3.5 years the first time. I got out and went right back for another year. So 4.5 years I did in prison. And that's when God set me out of the world. And he put me in a cell, and he put me across from a guy that went to Bible college. He had been in prison since he was 16 years old, and he had 32 years, and he was 38 years old, and the Lord seemed fit to put me right in this cell with this guy. And we had Bible college for 3.5 years in this cell, and I started preaching in prison, and I knew right away when I was saved. When I got saved at 21, when I opened up my Bible, it was like the Lord downloaded scripture into my mind. It's almost as if I knew what I was reading before I read it. It's almost as if I knew the answer to the question before it was asked. You know, it was just something totally supernatural. I knew that I was called to preach for 15 years before I even preached my first message. The Lord is just so good. The Lord is so good.